Hey there, and welcome to Facial Features Section 2. We're going to be retouching eyes. Now, we went ahead and included some JPEGs for you to work on. Let's go ahead and hit Controller Command O to open those up here in Photoshop. And you're going to go to your Facial Features, O to Eyes, Images, and we have some JPEGs here. Let's Command click on those and hit Open. It's going to pop them into Photoshop. Now, these are JPEGs. They are 8-bit. If you prefer to work on a 16-bit TIFF, all you have to do is export those out of Lightroom because we provided all these images in Camera Raw. So again, if you want to work on TIFFs, just click on an image, right click on it, go to export, and then choose your TIFF in 16-bit, and then you can just work on those images. JPEGs just make it, they're a lot lower file size, so for downloading it works a lot better. Alright, cool. Well, let's go ahead and get into it. So we've got 4 images today, and what we're going to be working on is we're going to show you how to brighten eyes, how to change the color of the eyes, how to enhance the color, how to add a little bit of details. I'm going to show you how to sharpen eyes as well as how to clean up the iris or any other details that we have around the eyes. So how we're going to do it is basically we're going to start with our first image, which is here on the top left. We're going to go all the way through doing everything we want to do to work on her eyes, and then we're going to move to the next image and go all the way through that one. Alright, great. Well, let's go ahead and start with this one. So Phlearn Retouch 26.jpg. I'm going to hit F for full screen, and we're going to zoom in. Okay, now we're going to do a little bit of SketchUp on this image just to get an idea of what we're actually going to be doing with the eyes. Now, when it comes to actually working with eyes, generally, we don't want to affect the area too close to the pupil or the white part of the eye. Generally, we're looking to affect this area of the eye. There we go. Alright, and it's going to be reflective of the light that's shining in the eye. So for instance, if a light is shining in this direction, which we can see a beauty dish right here, then it's actually going to be brighter over here. You can see it without this on. You can see how this is brighter than this. And basically that's the way that light enters the eye. It enters in, bounces around, and then bounces around on that side. So if a light enters in one side, make the other side a little bit brighter. Alright, now when coloring and lightening the eye, generally I stay away from getting too close. Like I won't go all the way to the edge here inside or the outside. Just looks a little bit better and gives it a little bit more realistic curvature. Alright, so that's the area that gets most affected when you're retouching eyes. Now, when it comes to sharpening, that's an area that this whole area is going to get sharpened, as well as the eyelashes on the top and on the bottom. Alright, well let's go ahead and get into it. So the first thing we're going to do to brighten up our eyes, we're going to grab an adjustment layer, and I'm going to go to curves. Alright, so we don't have to get incredibly complex here. Basically how curves work, you can make your darks a little bit darker, okay, you can make your lights a little bit lighter, and you can work on your midtones. Alright, generally with eyes I like to grab the slider more towards the right side and make the lights a little bit lighter. Alright, let's see how that looks. I'm going to hit Command or Control I on that, and then with my paintbrush I'm just going to start painting like this and make little swirls and stuff like that. I don't have to make anything that looks too smooth or whatever. Basically just painting in some detail. That's what my layer mask looks like, by the way. Alt or Option, click on my layer mask. That's just a bunch of squiggly lines. You're like, are you sure you're going to do that? Trust me, it'll look just fine. Alright, so, yep, just a few squiggly lines. That's all we need there. Cool. Paint some black in there, too. Alright, now we're going to go ahead and blur that. So let's go to Filter. We're going to go to Blur, and down to Gaussian Blur. Alright, and we'll just bump the radius up. There we go, until it basically gets rid of each individual brush stroke. So now my layer mask looks like that. Okay? And we can see it looks pretty natural on the eyes, which is perfect. Okay, now it's up to you to see how light you'd like to actually make your eyes. Because you have your layer mask in place, you can bring this point up even brighter, and that's going to make your eyes super bright, or you could go darker, but generally it looks better when it's a little bit brighter. Alright, great, that looks really good. Now it does look a little bit too bright here on the left side, so I'm just going to paint with black with my paintbrush, and there we go. kind of just put a little bit less light there. All right, cool. Well, that's brightening eyes, guys. You can see it's really not too difficult. The next step we're going to do is coloring eyes, and it's actually really similar. So let's grab an adjustment layer. We're going to go to color balance, and color balance is my suggestion for coloring eyes. It'll keep things looking pretty realistic. All right, let's crank the blue all the way up. I know it's not looking realistic now, but I'm going to hit Controller Command I on my layer mask, which is going to invert the layer mask. Okay, and now what I'm doing is just kind of painting in some little streaks and things like that on my layer mask. Painting with white on my layer mask. Remember, white makes things visible, black makes things invisible. All right, there we go. Very cool. Now we're going to do the same thing we did earlier with the curves. We're going to give it a little bit of a beautiful. So we're going to give it a little bit of a blur. I don't know why I said beautiful. Maybe because it just is beautiful. All right, so we're going to go to Gaussian blur, and that looks pretty good there. Okay, now it's up to us to actually decide what we want the color to look like. The reason I popped so much green in there is so I could see what I'm doing. Let's go ahead and hit this reset button. There we go. And now we can see about putting some yellow or some blue in the eyes. Some yellow looks pretty good. Maybe some red, maybe some cyan. You really can go pretty wild here depending on what you actually want out of your image. Alright. I suggest not going too far from the local color, the eyes, whatever they started with. Maybe bring the vibrance up a little bit. There we go. Some yellow and some red. Alright. That looks really good. Now if you want to completely change the color of your eyes, you can do something like a hue saturation adjustment layer. With a hue saturation adjustment layer, basically you just take your hue and drag this to the left or the right. And then, in that case, we're going to hit Controller Command I on that layer mask, make a little bit larger brush, and then go ahead and include the entire iris within this layer mask there. Alright. There we go. And you can get all kinds of weird effects now. Basically, you just crank your hue to the left or the right, and, you know, in that case, those eyes don't look real at all, so we would lower down the saturation a little bit there. Alright. Blue, lower down the saturation just a little bit, and maybe increase the lightness. Cool, so that looks pretty good too. So you can see there's a lot of different options here that you can do with eyes. I think that going, you know, if your eyes start off with this color to begin with, pump it a little bit to the left or a little bit to the right. I find that if you're going from brown and try to make them look blue, like, yeah, it kind of works, but a lot of the time it's it's a good idea to keep them relatively close to what they were originally. Alright, great. So now we know how to brighten eyes. Okay, we know how to enhance some of the color and add a little bit of detail. Alright, and we know how to completely change the color if that's what we want to do. Very cool. I'm just going to leave that off for now. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and sharpen up our eyes a little bit. Now I'm going to create a new layer. We're going to go over here to our sharpen tool. We have a blur tool, a sharpen tool, and a smudge tool nested together. Alright, let's go to our sharpen tool. When you're on your sharpen tool, just make sure you hit this sample all layers. That's going to make sure that you are able to do this on a new layer. Alright, and our strength we're going to have about 50%. So we'll just choose a large brush there, and I'm going to paint basically right over top of the center of the eye and over top of the eyelashes as well. Alright, so let's turn that off and on. So this is a way to get like minor sharpening on the image. There we go. And that's usually probably all you need, but if you want to add a little bit more, you can do that as well. And here's how we do that. We're going to create a new layer, and we're going to make it a stamp visible layer. So let's create a new layer here, and now our stamp visible layer, we're going to hit Shift Option Command E as an elephant, and that's going to make a stamp visible layer, which is basically just a copy of everything you can see. You can see it's just, you know, it's like all of this stuck on a new layer. Okay, now with this layer, we're actually going to use this layer to sharpen the eyes. So I'm going to change our blending mode from normal. We're going to go down to overlay. You know what? Let's choose linear light. Let's choose overlay for now. You can actually use any of these. I'll show you in just a second. So overlay looks good. Next, we're going to go to filter, other, and down here to high pass. Okay, now basically it's our job to decide how much sharpening we'd like to add to the eyes. General rule of thumb is like do as much as you possibly can while still making things look good. So there we go. Let's hit OK there, and we can see this is even more sharpening on the entire image. And you can just use the layer mask to make it just over the eyes. Alright, now let's see if we change this to something like soft light, hard light, vivid light. Ooh, that's kind of cool. Linear light. All of these are going to work with sharpening your images. So between linear light and overlay is just a little bit more subtle. So we're going to use this one. Alright, let's go ahead and make a black layer mask. I'm going to hold Alt or Option and click on my layer mask. There we go. And then I'm going to paint white right over top of my eye. Not so worried about the back one because it's not even in focus. So doesn't we don't need to sharpen an eye that's not even in focus. Alright, there we go. We have some color changes there. Let's go ahead and group those, and we'll see the before and the after with just the eyes. Cool. That looks really, really good. Alright, let's go ahead and move on to our next image. Each image is going to be a little bit different. Okay, so this image you can see the eyes are a little bit darker. We don't see as much detail, and then some other things are going to be required to kind of fix this up. So we're going to start it off in the same way. We'll make a curves adjustment layer. Okay, with my brush tool, choose a nice small brush, and let's just go ahead and crank this up. I'm going to hit Control Command I on that, and now with my brush tool we're just going to paint like this kind of stuff. Again, I usually just try to avoid painting like big, blotches of like, big fuzzy, like generally I don't want to just do that. It doesn't look as real. This looks good. Well, not yet, but it will in a second. And it looks more random. It looks more like real, basically. Alright, so let's add a blur to it. There we go. And then randomness looks nice and good. Alright, then we want to zoom out to make sure we're actually lightening the eyes an appropriate amount. Sometimes it's easy to go overboard, so you want to make sure you can see the image as a whole. There we go, like that. It looks cool, but they're too bright. You can see how they're brighter than like anything else. Alright, so you want to make sure that it's like believable bright. Alright, and I'm going to paint black over here on the left, just a little bit. There we go, looking good. Alright, now let's go ahead and add some detail into these eyes. Why not? With my brush tool, again, I'm just going to paint, you know what, I'll just paint red. It doesn't really matter what color I paint. I can always change it later. Just gonna add like little spots and stuff like that, because I can't see a ton of detail in the eye. I just would like to see a little bit more. So I'm basically like adding my own detail here. Alright, that looks pretty good. Let's change our layer blend mode to something like color dodge, which is going to give us a really interesting look. Okay, color dodge looks good. Let's go ahead and give this a blur so it kind of blends in a little bit better. Now in this case, we're only looking to blur it so it doesn't look like brush strokes anymore. Like that's as far as I want to blur it. I don't want to go crazy. There we go. That looks good. Now keep in mind we painted with red originally. I can always change that. Just make sure you're on the same layer that you painted red and hit Control or Command U, which is Hue Saturation. You also can go to Image, Adjustments, and down here to Hue Saturation, which, by the way, you can see the keyboard shortcut for, Control or Command U. There we go. Now I'm going to take my hue and bump it to the left or to the right. That looks kind of cool. You can take your saturation and bring it down or bring it up as well. And I can work on my lightness too. Alright, there we go. So that looks pretty good. And if it's too much of an effect, just lower your opacity a little bit. Alright, but there we go. We've added some lightness and some detail into the eyes. Let's go ahead and zoom out again to make sure it still looks realistic. If it's too much, just go in here and lower the curves or lower your opacity or whatever have you. Alright, let's go ahead and zoom in. Now the next thing we're going to take care of, let's grab a new layer, some of these like little veins and things like that here in the eyes. That's like totally normal. People have veins in their eyes. Oftentimes you want to retouch those out. So we'll create a new layer, and next we're going to use our, there we go, Spot Healing Brush tool. Now the Spot Healing Brush tool is really great for this sort of thing. You just want to make sure you get a couple options checked. At the top you want to make sure your mode is normal. You want to make sure your type is content aware. That's going to do a real good job filling in the areas and keeping an idea of what's in the surrounding areas. And then we want to make sure to hit sample all layers, and that's going to allow us to do something on a new layer. If you don't have sample all layers checked, then you have to do this on your background layer, which you don't want. Okay, so now with all those checked, basically my goal is just to paint right over all these like little veins or the areas that I don't want to be in the eye. So something like that works really well. Even get rid of things like this, and oftentimes even hairs like that. So this tool is really great. Now when it comes to right below the eyes, there we go. We're going to basically use the same tool to get rid of any like makeup smudges or things that we just don't want to see. Alright. Cool. Let's go ahead and work on this other eye too. Keyboard shortcut for this tool is J, by the way. Okay. There we go. That looks pretty good. Cool. So we just took care of a few of those little things in the eye. Alright, now the next thing we're going to work on with these eyes is enhancing our catch light. The catch light is basically this light where we can see a little bit of reflection from the strobes that we use to take the pictures. So to enhance those, what we're going to do is we're going to paint with white with our regular paintbrush. Right over top of this, there we go, and right over top of that one. Over top of this, and over top of that. Done. Not really. Okay, what we're going to do now is basically, I need this layer to only be visible where the underlying layer is lighter. In this case, it's lighter in the catch lights, so we can use a tool called Blend If to make this to make this layer only visible where the catch lights are. Okay, let's just do it. That'll help explain. So we're going to double click here on layer 4, which brings up our layer style. Now here in the layer style, you're going to see under blending options, here at the bottom, you'll see Blend If. We'll see gray is what you want to choose here. Gray, red, blue, green, and blue, honestly, in my experience, they don't wind up giving you much different results. I always stick with gray. Okay, now with the underlying layer, we want to go ahead and make this layer not visible where the underlying layer is darker. So I'm going to hold Alt or Option and click from left to right. It's important to hold Alt or Option. If you don't, these actually wind up moving together. If you hold Alt or Option and click apart, they wind up giving you more of a feathering effect, which is what you want. Okay, and now as I move these from the left to the right, you're going to see that this layer is becoming invisible where the underlying layer is darker and only visible where it's lighter, which is exactly what we want. So again, let's go back to the left and we'll show you guys what that looks like. Alt or Option, click and drag this to about there, and then come in with the dark side as well. Alright, and now we see our layer is just visible where the underlying layer is lighter, and in this case that's the catch lights. So we'll hit OK there. Alright, let's just turn this off and on. We can see what that did. So again, it's just me with a paintbrush basically like painting white over there and making our catch lights brighter. Now you can always adjust your opacity here. They probably didn't need to be that bright, but it is nice to have them a little bit brighter. Alright, and then sometimes if I'm feeling extra fancy, I'll go in here with a brush. We're going to choose a very small brush here. Alright, go ahead and bring our size nice and far down. There we go. And then again, we're going to be painting white. Okay, and basically I just want to enhance this little white area on the bottom area between where the eye and the eyelid touch. By enhancing these little like white areas, Just kind of makes the eyes look a little bit more like wet and like alive and shiny. So basically I've just got a really small brush and I'm just painting white right here. You can see it's already like there to begin with. We're just kind of painting in more. Alrighty. Painting it in more. Cool. The one on the right looks like it needs to fade away a little more naturally. Alright, so let's see the before and the after with that. Again, just a little detail there, but it makes the eyes look a little bit more like wet and alive. And that's exactly what we want. Alright, now let's go through our sharpening. So we'll create a new layer, stamp visible, Shift Option Command E to do that. Okay, we're going to change our layer blend mode to overlay, and then we're going to run a high pass filter on here. So that's with nothing. Alright. There we go. Now let's put a black layer mask on here, Alt or Option, and click on our layer mask. And we're going to zoom in and paint with our brush tool. We're going to paint white over the eyelashes here. Definitely over this end of the eye. Make sure to get the eyebrow there. All the stuff that's in focus right around the eye. And a little goop section in the middle. Whatever this is called, you want to make sure to get that as well. The goop section, that's probably what it's called. Alright, there we go. And here's the sharpening of the eye. Now if you ever want more sharpening, you can just hit Controller Command J to duplicate that layer. And now we've got 2 layers of sharpening, which in this case I think, oh, wrong button. In this case I think actually works for us. Except on the eyebrow. That's too sharp up there. Too sharp eyebrow, too sharp. Alright, that looks great. Let's go ahead and shift click all those layers and show you the before and the after with those eyes. Wow. That really is big difference. Very nice. Alright, let's move to our next image here. We're going to zoom in. Basically, we're doing the same thing. I just wanted to give you guys a bunch of examples, so you have a bunch of examples. Wow, you really thought that one through, didn't you, Aaron? We're going to bring this brighter. I'm going to hit Controller Command I on this layer, zoom in, and then I'm going to use my brush tool. Alright, paint white on the layer mask, something like that. Remember, we're going to blur this, so it really doesn't have to be that awesome. And I'm sticking on the opposite side as the catch light, just like what we talked about earlier. Alright, we're going to give it a little bit of a blur. A little bit more of a blur. Okay, beautiful. So there we have our eyes. I think it could use some more lightness right over there. Alright, so let's go ahead and give that a blur again. Okay, very cool. Now let's do, you know what, this time we'll do another curves adjustment layer. Why not? We'll go really bright with this one, hit Controller Command I, and this will add more details into the eye. Just like that. It helps a lot if you make the sound effects. You're going to want to make sure to make sound effects. Alright, now let's give this a blur. Not as much though. You can use your up and down arrows here, by the way. Alright, let's see about adding some color. So we'll add some red into the eyes, and maybe some green as well. A little more red. Alright. Beautiful. So a little bit more color into the size. Just kind of makes size, you know, a little bit more interesting. Alright. Really cool. So let's go ahead and well, they look pretty dang good already, to be honest. Let's move on to sharpening. Why not? Alright, I'll show you one more method for sharpening. We're going to create a new layer, Shift-Option-Command-E for a stamp visible, and we're going to go to Filter, Sharpen, and we're going to go to Unsharp Mask. Alright, now you choose your radius and your amount of sharpening, and your threshold basically determines where things get sharp. So I generally leave my threshold at 0. So bringing up our amount and our radius, we want to zoom out to get an idea of how this looks like as a whole, right? It doesn't matter how it looks really close up if it doesn't look good far away. Alright. There we go. Looking pretty good. So let's go ahead and hit OK there. Okay, now as far as the sharpen tool versus the unsharp mask versus the high pass filter layer, the end of the day, they're all just sharpening, guys. They all pretty much do the same thing. It's just preferred method. Whatever you prefer, go with that. Whatever's easiest. Alright, let's put a layer mask and then invert that layer mask. Alright, and then we're going to just paint white right here on our lashes and then this little area inside of there too. Maybe a little bit on the brow. Beautiful. And if it's a little too much, just lower the opacity. No big deal. Alright, great. Let's look at the before and the after with these eyes. There's the before and there's the after. They just have a little bit more life to them, which is what we want. Alright, and our last image here, we're going to be working with Alex. And Alex looks great. He's just got a lot of dark area in his eyes. So when eyes are really dark like this, we want to use a different tool. I'm going to hit Control-Command-J on my background layer to duplicate it. Next we're going to go to Image, over here to Adjustments, and over to Shadows/Highlights. Okay, we want Show More Options. Alright, now let's go ahead and move all this stuff to 0. Bum, 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 bum. Alright, we're not going to mess around with highlights at all. We're just going to go with shadows. So shadows, we want to bring up the brightness of this a little bit. You can work on your tone, which we're going to leave that down for now, and your radius. Now again, I don't really mind what the rest of the image looks like. Really, all I'm looking at is the eyes. Alright, and this is one of those things where it's like gonna be different for pretty much every image you work with, so it's just gonna take playing with these sliders. But you should be able to do a really nice job getting more detail back in your eyes if you have very dark eyes in your image. Now we also want to make sure we do color as well, because when things are dark, they don't tend to have a lot of color in them. So when we lighten things up, we need to add some more color as well. So our adjustments, we're going to bring our color up as well. So we can see there's the before and the after. It actually brings out the real detail that's in the eye. Okay, now I'm going to hold Alt or Option and click on my layer mask. And then here on my layer mask, what we're going to do is I'm going to paint white on my layer mask, revealing the eye. Alright, just don't cover up the center, which is the pupil. Alright, there we go. And when you have eyes that are so dark, generally I won't try to make them like super bright. It's just not a great idea. They're not going to look real. Most of the time they're not going to look real anyway. Bringing them up a little bit lighter is generally what you want to do. Alright, now let's do the add more detail step, because there's just not a ton of details here. Okay, well let's go to a curves adjustment layer. I'm going to bring this nice and bright here. Hit Control or Command I on that. And then we're going to grab our brush tool and we're going to paint really small Here we go. Just kind of add some more detail here. Again, this is going to get a blur, so I'm not too concerned about making it perfect or anything. Okay. That looks good. Now maybe let's go ahead and add some red. And some green. Red and green combined to make like brown, right? And so skin tends to look pretty good, and a good mix between red and green. All right, now let's go ahead and give this a blur. All right, looking pretty good. And we'll just fade this back in. Cool. So there's the before and the after with that. So you can see eyes that are really dark still have a lot of potential to lighten up. And I really wouldn't go much lighter than that because it's just going to start to look like Photoshoppy and weird. Like, hey, he's got really light, dark eyes. Okay. Anyway, don't want that. All right, and the last step, always with eyes. Sorry, not last step yet. We're going to create a new layer in here, and I'm going to use my spot healing brush tool, which is keyboard shortcut is J. We do need to clean up these areas here in the eye as well. Okay. All right, and you can see more of this white little line that happens here. See, it happens in like all the photos. You may have never even noticed it, but now you will, maybe. So you can just paint more if you want to do that. Or hit delete, you can do that too, whichever you want. All right, let's make a stamp visible. We're gonna go to filter, we're gonna go to sharpen and down to unsharp mask. All right. Oh, this is smart sharpen. We actually want to go to filter, sharpen, and unsharp mask. Cool. Now our radius, let's go ahead and pull that down a little bit, and the amount, we'll pull that down as well. All right. That looks pretty good. It's nice and subtle. Let's put a black layer mask on that, and I'm going to paint white here on this layer mask. In this case, it's kind of subtle, but I really like the subtlety of it. Let's just zoom in so we can see. There's the before and the after with that. All right, great. Let's group all those and look at the before and the after. So we can see the eyes really have come to life. Beautiful. All right, guys, and there we have it. That's 4 different photos. Let's just subtract these out. All right, and just like with anything else, you probably want to like get it to where you think it's good, take a little bit of break, and then come back and look at it again to make sure you still like it. Yeah, and in this case, I do like all the eyes. I think we did a really great job on them. So, congratulations, everyone. Pat yourselves on the back. All right, that is the end of this section. We'll see you in the next section where we're going to be working with hair.